I called for assistance.
For?
Well, come on in and I'll tell you.
Alrighty. So what's going on?
I just arrived from coming back from a year in Newfoundland.
Okay.
So I fled Ontario in July of 2022 to effectively whistleblow on a massive crime syndicate that's Ottawa based, but it has provincial, federal, and international reach.
Okay.
All of the evidence is on my website. You might want to write this down. It's pfi.rocks. P as in Peter, F as in Frank, I as in igloo, .rocks. The undeniable evidence which implicates the mayor of Ottawa is on the first tab, which I've just renamed to Mummygate, the Darkumentary. It includes 7 commissioned affidavits, complete with references to multiple exhibits, commissioned exhibits, with undeniable evidence that implicates over 300 white-collar, blue-collar, and thug-collar syndicate members in Ottawa.
Okay.
So I called today because the last of my dollars and possessions were stolen by the woman with whom I lodged for the last year. Her name is Shalene Crawley, Shelene.
Was she with you here, or is she back in town?
She's in Newfoundland, but I'm in this jurisdiction now. Her last name is Crawley, Crawley. The evidence has not completely been uploaded to the site yet, but some of it is at the Landlady tab. I attempted to file a police complaint with the RNC, and they deemed it a civil matter. They said this is civil in nature. This is exactly the same strategy that Auto Police uses. When I say, I was falsely accused of a crime, detained for 6 weeks, they emptied my house and stole everything I owned. And the Auto Police say, oh my gosh, that's awful, we'll wait for the investigator, and then they go, we're going to close the file and deem it a civil matter. So then I say, okay, then I sue the people who stole everything I owned, and a crooked judge shuts it down. And so this goes on and on and on. It's a long story until I eventually sue Auto Police for the exact same amount they milked from Ottawa taxpayers in 2020, $13.2 million. They proceeded to attempt to commit extortion. Evidence is on my website. Shut down the site action against us, or we are going to declare you a vexatious litigant and have all of your current lawsuits terminated and prevent you from seeking justice in civil court without leave. So I didn't fall for the extortion, and what happened after that is a series of motions and events that basically implicates beyond a reasonable doubt Auto Police Services. And because the Ottawa Mayor is on the board, as is the Chief of Staff for the Royal Ottawa Mental Health Centre. She's now the chair of the Ottawa Police Services Board, and I have dirt on that place too. Basically, NCR opinions are for sale.
Okay.
Anyway, so I needed this $5,000 roughly back from the woman with whom I lodged in order to safely make it back to Ontario.
Right.
A number of events happened in Newfoundland. Despite my impressive CV and experience and skill set, I couldn't land a job to save my life because I'm on a watch list. And when malicious ex cut me off of his piddly $1,200 a month spousal support, which he obtained through fraud, through court, he cut that off in January. I applied for welfare. They agreed to welfare for 2 months. Then they cut me off. Then I was in a women's shelter. We tried to talk some sense into them. Basically, someone from Ottawa must have called Newfoundland and says, cut her off, send her back to Ontario, because I can't stay in a province without income. Here, I can at least apply for social assistance. The earliest they can get me in is Monday at 9. I just booked that. So, you know, I'm at risk, clearly. I still own half of $1 million home on the water, the matrimonial home. I've been attempting to get a divorce from John Kiska. You might want to write this down. Jonathan William Patrick Kiska, date of birth, September 29, 1960, address 1244 Lampman Crescent in Ottawa, postal code K2C 1P8. My name is still on the deed of the house. I helped pay for it. I renovated it. I still own half of it.
And is that house located here in Ontario or in
Ottawa.
What's Jonathan's date of birth again?
September 29, 1960. He basically, when he realized that I realized there was something very wrong with him, he plugged into this syndicate that disposed of the spouse syndicate. Despite in 4-month investigation that said I should get sole custody of my children, and despite winning a precedent set in motion in court that I can seek damages of his torts and crimes in a family court setting, my children were illegally ripped from my home by the dirty cops and the sociopaths running CAS in Ottawa, ripped from my home, handed to them, restraining order against me. And then it just gets worse from there, which is why I call it Mummy Gate. So at this point, I involved Matt Peggs. I involved Matt Peggs last spring to let him know I would be leaving the province and attempting, he says, well, do your best to document this mess. He didn't call it a mess, the syndicate. So that's what I did. Been in touch with him since then. Haven't received any other than a call. What's going on? I said, well, I'll tell you what's going on. Look at my site. It's all in there in black and white. He says, well, keep doing what you're doing. I was in Newfoundland at the time, St. John's RNC jurisdiction, so was told by our CMP, you report to the jurisdiction, they put together the file, and they will send it back. Now, the first one I did as a flyer, which is just fraud, being, John Kiska committing court-enabled fraud. And of course, so they put the file together in Newfoundland, they ship it back to Ottawa. Ottawa says, this is a civil matter, shuts it down. So this is the interesting part, right? So while the crimes are being shut down, police as a civil matter that I have to bring an action for, the Ottawa police are having me declared vexatious and preventing me from bringing civil actions. So they don't have to actually do anything. So the organized crime is like, oh, this is a field day. This is awesome because we know we're not going to get charged and we know nobody can successfully sue us. So that's like, it's gravy. So I'm still following up. I've tried to escalate with RNC from Sergeant, you might want to write this down, although it's on my website. Sergeant Cunningham is the one who arbitrarily said, I'm not investigating this. There's 3 complaints he just closed. Even though all the evidence is there. I didn't even get a request for additional evidence. He just says, oh, the file was already open. I have a file number. And he says, I'm not investigating this. Ma'am, may I ask you if you're on any medications? I said, oh, why is that? So I'm concerned about your mental health. I was like, no, you're not. That's just the go-to when you're afraid to investigate the judges. So I went to speak to his supervisor, which would be Staff Sergeant Chris Huzzy, refused to return any calls. So I escalated and he reports to apparently an Inspector Anderson. So I received 1 call back, a voicemail. I've called twice, nothing. So since that point in time, I was basically defrauded and stolen from by this woman with whom I was lodging. I filed a police complaint against her on, I guess it was before I left, the 12th or something. And they said, no, this is a civil matter. And I said, no, it's not. It's theft and it's fraud. And she also threatened to call the police and accuse me of harassment. And that is also a violation of Section 465. 1B, conspiracy to prosecute. And it wouldn't be the first time someone has accused me of harassment and had me jailed, denied bail, and everything else, because that's what X did in 2019 to have the divorce trial canceled. So I'm a whistleblower, I'm a targeted individual, you name it. There's my ID, there's some PFI.rocks buttons. I could have more, I literally couldn't have more evidence. I put a call into who's your MPP here, Gates?
Yep.
See if they could do anything. Auto Police Services, Wayne Gates. I put a call into Outreach. They're coming soon. At this point, because Auto Police Services has stolen my passport and no one will give it back to me, I've got to try to get a new one. And because I'm a citizen in Canada and Ireland and Europe by birthright, at this point, the only way to protect my children is to prevent me from being framed from harming them. Mm-hmm. Unless someone else gives me some sort of forward motion, my only option is to seek asylum in a country that's not out to, bury me more than they already have.
Okay, so what would you like from this? You want an information file put in just in case this does catch up to you? Like you're talking about like with Ottawa Police, Newfoundland, from a Niagara perspective, just to document that you're back here, you feel threatened, you feel concerned about like.
No, I'd like someone to arrest the beefs that I have the evidence. I'd like somebody to figure out how to deal with this. I mean, it's if you read the definition of the criminal code, I've got a copy here.
Yeah.
If you read the definitions of trafficking in persons, that's what's happened. I've been trafficked through every level of court, so that all the Ottawa cops, and I'm telling you, their budget balloons every year. The Ottawa cops, judges keep getting hired, Crown prosecute. So this front for organized crime
Yeah.
exists and grows because people like me, you just get shuffled from one court to the other. You start off in family court, then they kick you over to Child Protection Services. That's a bogus file. Then you're back in family. Then they arrest you. So I'm doing this right now. I think I've had 50 court appearances and criminal court appearances based on bogus charges. So do you know how much money that is?
Yeah.
And then for them to all drop the charges after 2 years, after they've successfully jammed through an illegal custody and access order to benefit this guy I'm still married to, which is illegal because we're still married. And jurisdiction of child custody and access is federal legislation, the Divorce Act. So what they did is they circumvented the Divorce Act by utilizing the Courts of Justice Act, which has family law rules in it, which plugs into the Child, Youth, and Family Services Act, provincial. Right? So they utilize they just twisted these provincial laws to give the sociopath sole custody and access of my children when they don't even have jurisdiction. I mean, that's the simplest, I couldn't put it any simpler.
Yeah. Okay. So what I would do is we'll put the report through, and it goes to our fraud. If he believes he's been defrauded, like for two frontline cops, this goes.
Yeah, no, I've heard. I know.
This goes to a detective branch. We take the report. We submit the report.
Because we're talking about federal crime here, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking about trafficking. It meets the definition of the criminal code. We're talking about torture. Mental torture counts. I haven't seen my perfect children in 4.5 years. They haven't heard my voice. They have no idea what's going on. They were told I moved to Texas because I didn't want to be their mother anymore. They didn't know I was falsely accused, beaten, restraining order, denied bail. They don't know I've been fighting for them for 4.5 years.
Yeah.
This is child abuse. They've been emotionally and psychologically abused by the psychological equivalent of Paul Bernardo since, at a minimum 2019. I mean, that period. And then the other one is torture, trafficking, and, if you look up, 8317, it's terrorism because it's coordinated. Now, I can prove the collusion to a point, but sadly I can't wiretap all these things. So I can't go, beyond a reasonable doubt, this, and that. But that is exactly what it is. I can show you how they use IP addresses to communicate between the cell groups. And I know you just front line is a lot, but it's on my site. So if you want to find out how the syndicate operates, I've been studying these things for years.
Okay.
My background, I'm a chartered financial analyst. My background is business analysis, and I basically reverse engineered the hell they were putting me through because it was such a well-oiled machine. I'm sitting there going, this is too slick for me just to be unlucky. And then the more I learn, the more people send me tips, the more I put another piece together. And it's like, holy crap, this is actually a system. And then I plug into some guy in the US who's coming at it from another angle, Jack Pendergrass, and he's basically whistleblowing on an entity called Maximus Inc. It's on my site. And so in the US, the government has outsourced all social services, everything, like welfare, just everything, to this place called Maximus Inc. And basically people are just trafficked through the system, cradle to grave. It's orchestration of homelessness. It's orchestration of poverty, because that keeps another element of bureaucracy funded as they jam people like me onto the street. And people say, oh, it's a shame how some people fall through the cracks. It's like, no, we don't fall through the cracks. We're like stomped through the floorboards. No question. So I'd like some follow-up. I'm not just here to whine and complain. I'd like to see some arrests made. I'd like my children back. I'd like my house back. My ex owes me a minimum of $600,000 in overdue support and occupational rent. All these things that I was supposed to get via the Divorce Act. It's all legislated. This protection is all law,
Okay.
but all circumvented.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll put a report through. It's going to go to detectives branch. From there, they'd probably be reaching out. If they have like they'll put your website up, that do the full story, everything, how it's all connected, and then the next bet would be you take the frontline report. It goes to the detectives, and if they're going to do follow up, it'd be to you. So you'd be getting a call from like someone from what's called CIB or fraud department.
Okay, it's more than fraud. Like this is like a heavy.
I know that, but then they pass it around. We do the report, and it goes. We have like 10 different branches. We have human trafficking. We have fraud in it. So it goes to our criminal investigations bureau, and then they can decide where it goes from there. That's
Okay, because what I've heard is the backlog in fraud is so severe.
Yeah.
This kind of needs to be, in my view, escalated because these people are still operating. So for example, the Crown prosecutors are still jailing innocent people, so they lose their jobs, their apartments, their girlfriends, their everything because, I don't know if they're getting paid. I don't know how that works, but I guarantee you, the Crown prosecutors are letting the bad guys go and locking up the good guys. And so whatever decent cops are left in Ottawa, there's no point because to get a conviction in Ottawa, you need, let's assume for a second the police chief is legit. So you need a legit police chief, you need a, not bought and paid for a Crown prosecutor, and you need a non-crooked judge. So what's happening in Ottawa is the decent cops who nail, let's say, the rapist, the dealer, the whatever, well, it's all part of one gang or another. So they just buy off the Crown prosecutor and they go, oh, we don't think there's enough evidence to get a conviction. Off you go. And so if you got the system infiltrated by this many pro-crime individuals, taxpayer-funded pro-crime individuals, I mean, it needs to get shut down.
Have you contacted OIPRD, for the Ottawa Police? Like these are the options we get as frontline.
I know. I even recorded it.
Yeah.
It's pathetic.
Okay.
It's pathetic. And just like the Law Society of Ontario. Oh, it's a hoot. I've got another one for you. And Judicial Council. So Law Society of Ontario, you make a complaint, and I actually recorded this too. This is circa 2019, I think I was doing this one. My previous site was shut down because it was started implicating judges, and I got arrested again, and they said you don't get out of jail until you take down your site. So right now I have two. The one I built before, which is under TWB, and the one I'm rebuilding now. So I constantly have to bring back all this old stuff. So OIPRD is under the old one, LSO is under the old one, Judicial Council. So basically, LSO, you call them and say, well, these lawyers are they're breaking the law in court, in their pathological lies, etc. And they say, oh, well, that's beyond our jurisdiction. We just follow, ethics and whatever their code says. If they're breaking the law, there's nothing we can do about it. That has to go to the police. And it's like, well, the police are complicit, so they're not going to charge them. Oh, then go to OIPRD. And then so someone says, go to the Judicial Council to rat on the judges. So it's the same thing. And they actually said to me, well, if they're committing crime while they're working, there's nothing we can do about it. If they rape someone on the weekend, well, then we can kick them off the bench. But if they're defrauding people during the workday, yeah, we can't do anything about that.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true. 'Cause I've heard of officers getting arrested while on duty for something like an excessive use of force.
No, I'm talking about judges.
Oh, judges, yeah. That's way out of my wheelhouse. Anything with judges, that'd be the Law Society, like you said. But yeah.
Anyways, I appreciate you guys coming. I'm just like, can I just find out who you are? I like taking note of this because at some point someone has to do something about this, because once they're done with me, the low-hanging fruit, then everyone else is next. It's just because it's this insatiable greed this system has, right? They gotta keep the system going, and so it has to stop. So may I ask who I had the pleasure of meeting this afternoon?
Last name is McIntosh, MacIntosh.
And your cadre number?
My badge number is 9654.
9654. Thank you.
I'm Jess. I'm a crisis worker, so I'm actually not a police officer.
She just rides along with it.
Crisis worker. Okay, no
Yeah.
problem. Nice to meet you. I take calls and do Zoom meetings for anyone who's interested in learning more. So happy to help.
Delia, D''ELIA.
D''EILA. Okay, number
9767.
9767. Okay, you're welcome to a button. I have lots.
I'm okay, thank
You
you.
have a card. There's something else going on that you might really want to know about. Policy Horizons Canada. It's being rolled out at the federal government level, and the 338 are not talking about it. It has to do with all the digital ID, biodigital surveillance. Somebody else did the research on this, so that's why they're temporary. They're just creepy cards. He's a bookstore owner in Ottawa, and when he was shut down during COVID, he did some digging on this policy arm
Yeah.
and what they're rolling out, like, as we speak, and nobody knows about it. Nobody will talk about it. The media's garbage, as you probably know. Anyway, like I said, digital ID, CBDCs, biodigital convergence. It's pretty sick. What they're doing with food and biosurveillance. And if you say, no, that's crazy, you're a conspiracy theorist, the details on these cards will bring you to a link on my site. He provided all of the source documents, all the government source documents, all linked, so you can read it and question it yourselves.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're
All
welcome.
right.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
look forward to hearing from a detective.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. That was fun. Cheers.